Good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Hacking HR's February series. Today, we are going to be talking about leadership and executive presence for HR professionals. Excuse me. And I'm so happy to be here as your moderator. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz. What an inconvenient time to cough. Look at me being human. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, executive coach and fractional HR professional. And I have 20 years of HR experience in several different industries. Love talking about leadership and executive presence. And now I am a coach for executives and emerging executives, helping them to build that executive presence, boundaries, et cetera, and find joy in their careers. So I'm ready to welcome my panelists to the screen with me, and so happy to have everybody here with me today. We have an amazing panel of humans joining us this morning. Well, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. It's morning for me here on the East Coast of the US. So panelists, welcome. I'm going to ask you, we'll just go around in the order we're showing up on the screen. Lucy, Tammy, Pamela, Aura, Angela. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, tell us where you work and what you do, and why this topic felt exciting to you.
Hi, I'm Lucy Georgiadis. Very nice to meet you all, fellow panelists. I'm excited for today. So I'm in Miami. I'm on the East Coast, but as you can hear, my accent is not American. I'm from England. And what I do, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Elevate Leadership. We do one-on-one group coaching, live workshops, and we have an on-demand micro-learning platform of 5 to 10 minute classes on all the most critical management topics. So that's a little bit about what I do. What's brought me here is that for the last 13, 14 years, I've been an executive coach. So I've done many thousands of hours of coaching and training of managers at all levels. And what comes up a lot is executive presence, as Lauren has also found out in her work that she's done. And it's incredible how even with the most experienced leaders, it comes up quite a bit too. And so I found myself throughout my career helping people with exactly this topic. And it makes a really big difference whether you are over video or whether you're in person. So I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tammy Chapik. I am similar to Lucy. I feel like I say ditto on a lot of the upfront part. Founder and CEO of We Inspire We, an executive leadership coaching firm. We do a lot of what Lucy was talking about: coaching, leadership training, keynote speaking, strategic planning, all those fun things. But I came here, I wanted to get involved in this conversation specifically because my life prior to getting into coaching and to launching my business was in marketing and advertising. And I really believe in the importance of a brand and your brand and how you carry yourself. And I think presence is the number one most powerful way to exude and share your brand with other people. So I'm really passionate about the topic, and I help individuals really land in on what their leadership brand is and how to bring that to life more. So I'm excited to be here today to share a little bit of that and to learn from everybody here too.
I'm going to say ditto to everything that both Lucy and Tammy have said. I am not an executive coach. So hi, my name's Pamela. I've got probably, I think, one of the longer last names. I'm a VP of talent strategy for Nielsen, the ratings company. I've been there a little over 2 years. And so most of my time is spent, what I like to say, building better leaders. So I work with our executive team in a consultative way around building strategy and helping them to become better leaders. And so for me, I have a little bit of a different view around why I'm here and what drove me here. It is fascinating to me the different ways that we think about leadership presence. Most of my EC and executive teams have been male, and so it's a very different approach when I'm working with female leaders versus male leaders. And it's something that I really want to, hopefully we get some time to dig into, to think about the different ways that we expect our leaders to act and what that looks like, and how this is for me as much as it is for the audience that's watching too. I'm excited to learn from some of the amazing people on the panel, but I think this will be a great conversation to bring some of those points to light.
Hello, everybody. Aura Hioe here. I work as the HR manager at Lactalis US Yogurt. Super excited to be here. The topic that why I decided to speak in this topic is because throughout my career, I actually work in HR, but I didn't start in HR. I started operations and have been in 5 different departments to grow within the company. And I have the opportunity to work with global leaders who have different roles. And so leadership and executive presence is something that I have experience with, and I wanted to share and also learn with all of you. And super excited to be here. And as a reminder, my feedback that I share here is feedback from me, not necessarily representing my employer. Thank you.
Hello, everyone from beautiful British Columbia in Canada. The problem with being last is you want to say ditto because everybody said what you wanted to say. My name is Angela Champ. I'm a human resources executive. I've worked in industries like banking, insurance, oil and gas, construction, and others. And I'm also the author of a couple of books, most recently, The Squiggly Line Career. What interested me in this topic is I've always been interested in work that involves elevating and promoting women, particularly into C-suite positions. And like what a lot of people said, executive presence is a really important factor in how people perceive you and how people perceive your competence. And there is a difference between how people have executive or demonstrate executive leadership in industry, whether it's male dominated or female dominated. And so I'm very interested in contributing, but mostly about learning from the other panelists as well.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. I love that we have this combination of leadership experts, coaching, HR, executive. I think it's going to be a really rich conversation. If you're following along and watching us today, welcome. And I can already see we have people from all around the world, which is the amazing beauty of being able to do things through live stream. If you have questions for us and you're watching during this live stream, feel free to ask them in the comments. We'll pay attention to the comments and we'd love to include you in the conversation. Comments or questions are absolutely welcome. So as we get started, I would love to ask this question, which is, what do you see as the distinction, if any, between leadership and executive presence? And panelists, just feel free to jump in, take yourself off mute, and pay attention to the mute button so that we can see that we don't interrupt each other.
All right, I'll go first since I'm off the mute button. The difference between the two. So I see executive presence as being something where we're wanting to come across with the gravitas and the authority that's really befitting of our position or the position that we want to be in, so that we really inspire confidence and trust. But I see leadership as being something which is more about like how you're inspiring your team, and it's the way that we're interacting with our team and making sure that we're inspiring confidence and trust for them and in them as well. So it's less of a kind of inward facing, it's less of a personal thing, and the leadership is more of the outward piece to the team.
I think if I'm going to simplify it, for me, executive presence is the how. It is getting the buy-in, it is the influencing, and the leadership is the what. It's the strategy, it's the overarching, what are we trying to accomplish as a company? What's our vision? So put in layman's very simplistic terms, that's what it means to me.
I agree with what Lucy and Pamela Lynn have said, and I'd like to add that they're not mutually exclusive. You can be a mid-level manager and have both leadership presence and executive presence, and you can be an executive and have neither. So they're not mutually exclusive. You can have both at all levels.
I will add, from my perspective, that executive presence is the consistency within a person interactions and within person actions that mirror everything within an organization and also outside of an organization. And leadership includes the influencing another, more of the tactical and strategic part that pretty much put the entire puzzle of that individual or person.
I think everyone's kind of saying a lot of the same thing, and I agree. Especially with Angela, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I tend to look at leadership as an attitude and a right. Everybody has the ability to be a leader, and I look at it simply as the act of moving things, self or others, forward. The presence around leadership comes with that attitude, that owning your stuff, believing in yourself, all those things. And executive layered onto that is kind of just more of the role, right? So as you continue to grow up in your role, there are things that, you know, are, I would say, more acceptable or less in regards to how you carry yourself and the presence that you have.
Thanks, everyone. There's, I think, a distinct shift in our minds as HR professionals between being a mid-level professional and an executive. And I know when I was in my 20 years in HR, there was a point at which something shifted for me and I felt like I had developed executive presence. But that can be like a really mushy feeling. So if we're talking right now, you know, executives who know they have executive presence, cover your ears. The ones who are in that mid-level and emerging into leadership and developing their skills, what's the how to get from I'm an individual contributor or I'm a frontline manager to embodying executive presence?
Lucy used the word gravitas earlier, and that's a word I use a lot when I'm talking to employees who are looking to promote or if I'm coaching, particularly women. And this is an important part of if you're moving up. Gravitas doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be serious and somber and never smile. That's not what it means. But there's a difference between a silliness that can come, a playfulness, a silliness that people can exhibit versus a much more heavy-weighted, I want to keep using the word gravitas, but I'm trying to find synonyms for it. And that actually is part of the how. For example, I worked in national insurance companies, multinational companies, and one factor that's often stands in the way of people being promoted when we're sitting around in the executive room, when we're talking about who we want to promote or who's going to be on the high potential list, which is a topic for a whole other panel. Often what I hear is, no, this person's just not serious enough. This person's is just too silly. And the how is, how do you exhibit a playful and approachable personality without crossing that line and seeming silly or not serious enough? And I think part of it is being really serious about your work, still having fun while you're doing it, getting along with your coworkers, but not being silly about it. I think that that's a big how.
Okay, I'll go. For me, a lot of the how, when people ask me how, is starting to get some feedback from people, because sometimes you think you have executive presence, but you don't have as much as you think you do. And sometimes you have so much more than you think you do, and you're really selling yourself short. So I think, Lauren, that when you talk about that kind of like that tipping point, that shift into like, oh, I think I've like switched into having executive presence. Sometimes it's just very helpful to enlist some supporters around to just give you some feedback. In the next team meeting we have, I'm like wondering if you can give me a bit of feedback on my executive presence, because bloody blah, and then get some lifetime feedback on how well they think you came across. And that can be the most powerful way to get started, because I think it's sometimes quite difficult to know where you've got some gaps.
I will add to that great insights from Angela and Lucy, and I love everything that Pamela and also Tammy shared in the previous question. I will add that one part that for me is key in executive presence is, I would say, being authentic and backing up everything that we are saying and doing with actions and behaviors. I think that is where a great differentiation happen with leaders and executives, because that, in combination with what Lucy and Angela have said here, will pretty much create an atmosphere of, trust, and also of that the leader and this executive understand not only what the role is, but as a person and as an individual, but also the role as being part of the collective. And that's the other part, mobilizing the collective to the next level.
I think there's some really beautiful things in here that we've been talking about. And when I think about executive presence, we've used the word gravitas, and I think the definition for that maybe can vary based off of who you are and what you're thinking about. But I like to just think about it more in regards to confidence. It's that ability to kind of show up in the room, to bring yourself into the room, to command attention, be taken seriously. And I think that's a lot of the layers that come into how to exude executive presence, right? It's knowing what you're doing. And when you don't, asking or seeking others around you, it's a confidence in the way that you carry yourself. I do think a little bit of it is image, but not about like physical appearance, like how's your hair done, but more about like, are you put together? Are you carrying yourself in a way with, strong shoulders, your body language? Are your clothes wrinkled or not? Like, I think there's some of that goes into it, but I think a lot of it really is the crux of it is that confidence and belief in yourself and how you're showing up in the room to be able to lead the conversation, lead the decisions. And that's really when we get into executive levels, right? It's about that, being able to kind of command the room, if you will.
I love what Tammy said. And if I can just build on that, because I imagine that some people listening to this right now are heard the word confidence and are thinking, but I have imposter syndrome. They're going to figure me out as a fake. What am I doing here? And I know that one of the comments on the chat, somebody mentioned about having to pass the imposter syndrome issue. And the confidence, a lot of people struggle with imposter syndrome. And what I'd like to say about that is you need to go into that saying, oh my goodness, I don't know what I'm doing, and they're going to figure me out as a fraud. Instead, go in and say, I'm new at this, and I have the ability to learn and grow as a professional. And that's the difference of how you can tip from imposter syndrome and showing lack of confidence to, I like to call it cheerleader syndrome, and showing confidence, because what you're doing is you're also believing in your own self, your ability to learn, your ability to grow as a human being. And that also contributes to executive presence, is a belief in yourself, not an arrogance. We're not talking about thinking you're the smartest person in the room, you got it all figured out. It's also being able to show that vulnerability that, hey, I'm learning and I can figure this out because I'm a human being and I've learned and I've grown as a human being in the whole of my life. And so I wanted to touch on that word confidence that Tammy said, because some people might be thinking, oh, but no, I don't have confidence because they're going to figure me out as a fraud.
I think it's really interesting that the conversation, somebody put it out in the chat, it's 6 females in the room talking about it. And I wonder how different it would be if there was a male present. And I wish we had one stay on the panel, because we're talking about building confidence, right? And we went right into imposter syndrome. And I'm sure most of you have coached a lot of male leaders. And I think the conversation is much less skewed to that building of confidence. And I think it's probably more around, if it's aligned at all with what I've seen, it's more about learning how to read the room, learning how to sort of control that desire to sort of, that control and command type of leadership, which we're trying to move past into a more empathetic view and inclusive view of what that looks and feels like. And I think that there are definitely unspoken differences around what that looks like, executive presence and now it's not even just male versus female, right? As a parent of a non-binary teen, there's a whole new level of communication and things that we need to think about in terms of being inclusive and how we think about executive presence. And for me, it really does come down to, why do we think about women having to overcome more on that, feeling like an imposter, we don't deserve to be here, and coaching there versus male, or the stronger presence, no matter what the gender might be, is, bringing that back in. I think it's fascinating and something I'd love to dive in more, but the points that we've made here already have just been so wonderful to hear. The expertise here is amazing today.
Oh my gosh, you all have just brought up like 67 more questions that I want to ask you. So I do want to touch on some of the comments, and I'd like to ask us to there are two comments in particular that I want to bring to the front. And Angela and Tammy, you touched a little bit on the imposter syndrome and that sort of thing. And Pamela, you brought in that tends to be female leaning. Interestingly, the imposter syndrome comment came in from a male viewer today. That icky feeling for me was crossing the imposter syndrome bearing. Once I realized I knew what I was doing and talking about, I began to demand a more proactive HR presence. And just before that, we have a comment from, I'm not sure if it's Larissa or Larissa, executive presence is much about the image, while a leader can look humble. So there's this sense that I get from both of these comments in particular that executive presence is an act. And so, what are your thoughts on these comments or any other comments that you've seen coming in about acting the image versus demonstrating executive presence, demonstrating leadership, and if it comes into the conversation, like what's that turning point where you are able to hop out of imposter syndrome and not feel like you're playing a part?
I'll jump in. I don't believe that executive presence is an act. I believe that it is that inner, to echo kind of part of the last conversation, that inner confidence or belief in yourself. I think it's that shift in your mentality around, this is my daily job. These are as an individual contributor, and I'm doing these things, to I'm overseeing people doing these things, to I'm seeing how the larger company or the larger things are coming together, and that shift in perspective and belief that you can play a role and add value in all of those areas. It's the ability, right, to communicate effectively and get everybody excited and on board with the things. I think imposter syndrome holds a firm root in everybody's experience as they're growing up, developing their leadership presence, developing their executive presence, whether they're male or female. I actually work with a couple of male clients who struggle with it on a regular basis. I recently, and I think the heart of it all, right, is that belief in yourself, going back to the evidence. Have you been successful before? Can you get here again? And just want to share one last little plug, and then I'll let everybody else weigh in. But I just recently read an article by Barbara Cochran, and she was talking about imposter syndrome and really looking at it through a very different lens. And I loved it. And I just want to share it with everybody here, because it's about not looking at it as, oh, I'm going to get caught, I'm going to get found out, but looking at it, hey, this is because I'm growing. This is because I'm stretching myself in a new capacity, and this is an opportunity for me to shine, to figure it out. So almost embracing it as a gift of like, okay, I'm uncomfortable because I'm growing here, versus feeling like something's going to limit me or I'm going to get caught, busted for not being who I think I am.
I will add, I love what Tammy shared. I will add that same lines. I do not think or believe for one moment that executive presence is an act. I would say executive presence is a way of living. And what I mean with that is executive presence we display it in every aspect of our lives. So for those of you that believe like, hey, I have imposter syndrome, I don't think I'm doing it right, or I don't think I have what it takes, look at the other aspects of your life and see where you are leading well. That confidence, it can be something as simple as things that you are doing at home or things that you are doing somewhere else. And use that confidence to see how are you approaching those spectrums in your life. And you may find some commonalities, which are you are focusing in the bigger picture. You are focusing in the collective. I speak a lot about the collective. You are focusing on how you can help others lead and manage other areas. So executive presence is a way of being, and it's a way of interacting. And then once you have it, you will lead consistently with not only authenticity, but also understanding that you are a part of a much larger situation or team, and that you can influence and help them, and vice versa. The rest of the collective can help you become broader, can help you change your point of view about something, and can also enhance your executive presence and your leadership through interactions.
I would also, whilst I do agree that it's not an act, as a Slight caveat for that. I would say that for those of you who don't feel like you have executive presence, hoping that you're going to wake up one morning and feel that confidence is unlikely. But if you do want to have more executive presence, there are things that you can do to make small moves that you can build on, small changes that you can make that go a really long way in how you speak and how you show up and where you position yourself in a room or how you position yourself on a camera. And so if you don't, you may need to fake it a little until you feel it, but you'll very quickly see how responsive people are when you do implement some of these like small changes that we hopefully will go into and talk about at some point today. But I think whilst it's not an act, you may need to find that you do a little bit of that to start with until you feel more comfortable and you start to see those techniques and things that you're doing differently pay off, and see how you feel differently when you sit in a room differently or you speak slightly differently, not inauthentically, but just building these small tips and tricks on each other until you feel very, very confident being and having that executive presence that you'd like to.
I'd love to build on what Lucy said about the small acts. So there was a comment in the comments by one of the participants who said, I'll never forget my first promotion. All of the men got a handshake and I got hugged. And that showed a difference between genders. And sometimes women might struggle a little bit more with showing that gravitas and that executive presence. And in that case, if you think that that might be a situation for you, is going to the room and extending your hand first. Like we're talking about small things that you can do, is extend your hand before you get close enough to be hugged. But I'd like to give you an example. One of my very first jobs out of university was I was the mailroom clerk for an insurance company. And at lunchtime, I did the reception, the switchboard operator duties, lunchtime relief. And we were an injury office, and so we'd get a lot of calls from lawyers. I noticed when I was on the phone that the male lawyers would phone and they would say, "Hello, this is John Smith phoning for Bob Jones." First name, full name. Women lawyers would phone and they would say, "Hi, this is Rhonda. Is Bob Jones there?" And I noticed it like over the course of doing this reception relief, that there was a difference between the way the men introduced themselves or called and the way the women did. And it really imprinted on me. And so from then on, I always gave my full name, especially if I'm calling somebody. I'd say, "Hi, this is Angela Champ, blah, blah, blah." And I'm giving this example because we were talking about, somebody made in the comments about image, somebody talked about gender differences. And to Lucy's point, sometimes it's the small things you can do to help build that gravitas, to help build that executive presence. Even something as simple as you put your hand out first to shake your hand, or you use your full name, and maybe don't, when you see somebody, greet them, unless you're good friends or something, as "Hi, how you doing?" That can make you very likable. People like people who are sweet and charming, and that is not gravitas. And so it is small things like that that can help elevate it, no matter the level that you're in. I just wanted to add to Lucy's point on that.
Can I just throw in a question for the panel here? And I think, Angela, you raised something very interesting in my mind around how much of executive presence is acting masculine versus acting like yourself. And or you keep mentioning authenticity, and I love it. Like that's a platform I truly get behind. And I think we need to be mindful of that, right? Is executive presence acting more masculine, carrying masculine energy, or is it being yourself in a more professional manner? And I think it's the latter, in my opinion. So I love what you said, Angela, about saying your full name, because I think that gets to confidence. I don't think it necessarily gets to being like a man, but I wanted to flag that for the group and see if there's anything that jumps out at you as how do you balance the gender roles and when you bring executive presence into the conversation. And sorry, Lauren, to jump in and add a question.
It's a tough question, right? I think that we come to this with sort of these we've got the data to drive where we're coming from with our approaches, and women and men do think and act differently. There's no harm, no foul in saying that, but it's hard to hear it, right? Because we want to talk about being ourselves and we want to coach our leaders into doing the same. But bottom line is, where I might be seen as assertive or passionate, which means emotional, and a male would be received differently. The exact same behaviors, the exact same phrasing, so there are differences in the way that things are perceived. And so when I'm coaching my leaders or when I'm working on my own, I really do come back to, and I think it was Tammy, both you and Angela, we've all talked about it, the authenticity piece. I have, if there's one thing for me is I have no game around the act of it. While I do think that there are some aspects we fake it till we make it. We've all faced imposter syndrome at some point. I think owning it and just doing the best that we can, and being more mindful of the work and the effort that we put into getting to where we are in our careers makes a huge difference. And I feel like, to go back to Tammy's question, it's difficult to sort of see that it's a double standard to me, and I don't have an answer for it. I'm aware of it, and I try to make sure that my leaders and my execs are aware of it. But I don't know of what there's no way to solve for it except for to continue to call it out and bring it into the conversation and questioning, well, hey, why we do this to this person, but it was perceived that way. You just keep it on top of mind.
And I want to continue on this topic, but I just want to break in with your point, Pamela, on the calling it out piece. I had mentioned Robert and Larissa's comments, and I threw in the word act. And we've talked a little bit about act versus authenticity and how they can be similar. And Robert came in with what I would consider executive presence to explain that my interpretation was not what he intended. Nobody is offended. We're all talking in a very executive presence and leadership manner about all of those pieces. But how powerful for Robert to come into the conversation and to clarify that it wasn't his intention to say that executive presence is an act. He further explained in another comment his own experience with imposter syndrome. And then Larissa came back into the conversation. I wish we were all in the same room with her definition of what she's seen as the view of executive presence. This is executive presence. To be able to be in a room with other people who may be your peers, who may be at a higher or a lower title than you, and feel like you get to be part of the conversation. So let's talk a little bit about that. And if you have additional comments from the last piece, please, bring that into the conversation. But it feels like the way that we're headed is like, how do you be authentic? How do you come into the conversation confidently? And I do want to bring in the male, female, non-binary, differently identifying folks as well, because if we're looking at, some of these examples of men being seen as confident and strong and women being seen as emotional, I'm asking the longest question I think I've ever asked in my life. But how do we bring authenticity into all of our interactions so that we can have these kinds of conversations, whether we're live and in comments?
I will go first. I strongly believe that leading with authenticity and your executive presence is key, because you only can be you. I say this to a lot of people, like, I only can be Ora. I have never learned to be somebody else. So this is what you got, and it's important because with time, people will see the consistent action and behaviors that you have, and that boosts character. And that boosts also reputation. And that also boosts a consistency and trust. If we, for example, show a demeanor or an action or a behavior that is not ourselves, it's gonna be hard to replicate, because how can you be somebody else that you're not? And I know that there are times where, if you are in a role, you may feel that you have to act and behave in a certain way. But I will say that the more that you live with your own self, with your own authentic self, the better you will be in the long run, because then people will get to know you and understand you for who you really are. And then you're not going to see in a topic eye to eye with everybody. impossible. We are all different people. We have different lenses of how we see and experience life. So instead of trying to mirror those point of views, feel free to bring yours to the conversation and ask, why do you think the way you do? Why do you see this point of view the way you do? And you can provide your own perspective. And I know this can be scary at first, but come from a part of looking to understand, not looking to judge, because I don't think one answer necessarily is better than the others. We all are different. And I'm going to bring back the collective again. Collectively, we are better together. Collectively, we can learn from each other. I, for example, cannot compete with Lucy or with Tammy or with Lauren or Pamela here or Angela, right? What they bring individually to the table, only they can bring. Only they have the experiences in their lives, right? And vice versa. What I bring to the table, they cannot bring. However, together, we can become a powerhouse because they share all these knowledge, experiences that they have. And in this conversation, they are enriching me, because I'm learning something that either I didn't know, or obviously I didn't have the experience that Lucy had, or any of them. So if we focus in the collective and how we can learn together, it's easier to bring those barriers down that trying to either imitate or thinking that you cannot be authentic because the people are different to you. Everybody's different, but you are yourself and you are awesome the way you are, and you can continue to learn, which is something that all of them brought here. You can become better and better each time.
I want to have Aura come speak. I love the idea of the collective, and I think it's a really powerful way to communicate and to bring people together. So thank you for sharing that. And I want to build on that a little bit, and I'll make it brief. For me, I think part of this is around the absolutely is working together and recognizing that the sum is greater than the parts, right? We all bring our own strengths. I think that there is a maturity. You can be authentic, and we need to be. I can't be inauthentic. I joke I have no poker face. I still think I have a strong executive presence because I think that I know the expertise that I bring, and I think that I am good at building relationships. I don't think I know. But it's interesting to me that one of the things that I tend to focus on a lot is the space around EQ. So I think that in order to have really strong executive presence and to build on what you've already got, one of the things that we work on is building that maturity, building that EQ, learning how to read the room. So while we may always be authentic, I think the way that we approach a message, approach a meeting, approach, trying to get buy-in or alignment on something, our messaging style, our communication style will shift based on who we're trying to communicate to and what we need to get back from them, based on learning how to read the room. And I think that's one key piece of executive presence that we haven't talked about yet today. That EQ piece is so critical to be able to get alignment.
I'd say on the authenticity piece as well, that there's quite a lot of practical things that you can do to make sure that you are coming across as an authentic leader. I'll give you just one tip, though there's others that we can talk about, but I think one of my favorite ones is just to, as we've been talking, you can't be everything to everybody, although you do want to show up differently to different audiences. And that is a big part of having the EQ to understand where you show up and how you show up. But I think sometimes there is the temptation that you kind of are too much of a chameleon, which then makes you come across as more inauthentic. And I think one of the best ways to overcome that is to, just from a very practical sense, just pick maybe 3 words that you would hope people would use to describe you as a leader. What 3 words would you hope people would use to describe you as a leader? For example, like approachable, fair, inspiring, something like that. And having these 3 words really helps you define what authentic means to you. And it acts a little bit like a North Star, which helps you stay authentic even when you're tempted to try and be somebody that you're not.
Thank you. We have a question or a comment from LaDonna that seems to be resonating with other folks commenting as well, asking us to speak about both organizational culture and personal culture, whatever that means to us. And LaDonna didn't use the word personal. Her actual quote was, "Please speak about culture, both org culture and the intersectional acceptance. Example, some cultures may position this much more challenging with aspects of actions like eye contact and handshaking." So if your culture differs from either the org culture or broader scope culture, how do you address that and remain authentically you and also have executive presence while not falling in line? And Pamela, I see you're all ready to jump in. Bring it on.
It's only because I'm going to restate and then turn the mic over to some of my amazing panelists here. It's the EQ piece. It's knowing how to read the room. I think you have to understand your audience. I think you have to understand and develop that cultural sensitivity. And not everybody comes from the same place. I've seen some amazing comments about where some of this imposter syndrome comes from. It's not always from the same place. There's socioeconomic, there's cultural, there's a million different factors that tie into it. So I think that EQ piece is hypercritical in being able to understand and be respective of and responsive to cultural and socioeconomic and community differences that are going to impact how your messages will resonate and how you will be seen and heard or not as a leader.
I agree with the EQ side of the house here. And I missed part of the last conversation. I apologize. But I like to think about authenticity and how we show up as a dial. I like to tell people, know your audience, know your room, know the situation, and you dial up or dial down your authenticity or your approach to situations based off of that. So you're not changing who you are at the core, right? But you might be turning up maybe some assertiveness or turning down and listening more and just, bringing those things into life. It's a fluid thing. It's not hard and fast.
I agree with a lot of what was said. And in fact, I was going to also talk about bringing in that emotional intelligence. And we haven't used the word politics yet. I know people cringe when they hear politics, but politics is about understanding how to navigate the nuances of a particular organization or culture. So having the emotional intelligence to understand the particular nuances of the culture that you're working in can help with that, creating the gravitas, creating the executive presence. You're right. It may not look the same in Vancouver, British Columbia, as it does in Tokyo. It may not look exactly the same, but you can still bring that executive presence in both the external, like your image, how you dress, whether or not you shake hands or how you bow, in how you project yourself to others, how you speak, the words that you choose to use, the emotional intelligence that you're drawing on. So it can look different. It should look different. And I used, the example of Vancouver to Tokyo, but even within Vancouver, the way that executive presence will look at a major bank will look different than if you were early Facebook days. It's going to look different because the cultures are different. And there's this old book, some of you may have read it. It's called Rule Makers, Rule Breakers by Michelle Gelfand. And in it, she talked about cultures that were tight or loose cultures and how people acted more as a collective or more individualistic. But I love that book because it also describes certain organizations, even though it was talking about nations. There are companies that are more tight and companies that are more loose, and executive presence will look different within those organizations. And that's where your emotional intelligence and EQ, as Pamela has brought up, will make a difference.
I just also wanted to... everything you guys are saying. I will add, I think that all of you brought amazing points. As I think about these questions, the first thing that popped up to my mind was actually diplomacy. And I do think that every leader and every person that has executive presence have started to master in certain way or to like understand a little bit more about that. And that comes with a lot of what my fellow panelists are saying here, which is understand, and again, I'm gonna go back to the collective, understand the collective. And I think that one of the tips that I can give here, which can help with that, is example, like if you go to the office, let's say your work is going to the office, right? You will, let's say, wear certain clothing, right? But if, for example, if they invite you to a formal dinner, for example, you probably won't wear necessarily the same, and you probably will bring somebody with you, right? If you go to the grocery, let's say you operate, it's still you are being your authentic self, but understanding the room, understanding the collective, and using your understanding of them, it can better help you to have your leadership, depending on what is needed on that day or time, your executive presence, and your obviously your diplomacy, and what you mentioned, Angela, here regarding politics and how you understanding how you can help them, how you can support them. It's also important. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I think if you've got diverse cultures on your team, and this I'm kind of directing at people who are managers, and I think it's really easy as managers who are not in the kind of cultural minority to remember that obviously having authentic leadership and being influential and having executive presence is going to be hard for some folks from different cultures where that is not their cultural norm. And they can be quite, and they shouldn't necessarily need to be broken, but some cultures are trained, not to interrupt each other at any cost. And others think it's rude to look elders in the eye, and other people encourage people to speak more quietly. And I think when you're a manager, if you're trying to help somebody with their executive presence, being really aware of their personal cultural norms before you start giving them a bunch of tips to kind of help is really, really important, so that you really understand where they're coming from. And you can simply ask, in fact, you can ask your whole team, it's a nice exercise to do, are there any cultural or familial norms that may play into the way that you show up at work? And this is a really nice team building exercise as well, because we tend to make a preference for those who have very complementary norms to ourselves. But if you understand the cultural makeup of your team a lot better and the norms that come with them, you'll learn how to make space for different styles of communication, and you'll learn how to help different members of your team with their executive presence in a way that feels very authentic to their culture or familial norms.
There are so many good comments coming in, and so many questions I'd love for us to answer. As we're starting to move into the final minutes of our hour, which I can't believe, I would love for us to talk about HR folks specifically. We've talked a lot about authenticity. We've talked about cultural immersion and cultural differences. We've talked about, we haven't said the word bravery or courage, but a lot of that was in here, right? To have the courage to say things that make you appear as a leader. What I'd love, and there were a couple of comments coming through, is how does this apply to me as an HR professional? We're a very special department, aren't we, of people who are sometimes seen as rule followers, sometimes seen as parenting the organization, sometimes seen as leaders and culture setters, and probably a million other things. But if you're thinking specifically about HR professionals who are either transitioning into leadership or who have trouble stepping out of some vision of how HR is in other people's eyes, how do you recommend HR people tactically come in and make moves to present themselves with executive presence?
All right. So I'm sorry. Was somebody else going to start? All right, good. I love this question. And for HR, so for many of us on this call who work in human resources, I'm sure you've walked down the halls or been on an online call and somebody has either said, hey, HR is here, or referred to, go see the HR girl. We get that a lot, right? We are either HR or we're HR girl or HR. I've never heard HR boy, but HR. So part of it is sometimes people don't see us by our names as human beings. They see us as the gatekeepers, the rule makers, the no people. I think one of the pieces of advice I would have for the folks on the call who are human resources professionals is make sure you're drawing those boundaries. So when you walk into a room and somebody says, HR is here, you can actually say, actually, my name is Angela Champ, or whatever it is. And of course, say it in a way that doesn't come across as rude or disrespectful, but really start positioning yourself as a leader within the function and not just as a faceless, nameless function. The other thing is, I know this is going to maybe cause a little, but really look at the way you dress and the way you carry yourself. Tammy mentioned earlier about, are your shoulders squared, or I always advise my team members, dress slightly better than the dress code requires you to. So if everybody's wearing hoodies to work, wear a collared shirt. If everybody's wearing a collared shirt, put a blazer on when you're talking to people. Whether we like it or not, the way people dress influences people's opinions of you. This is why when the Oscars are on, everybody wants to watch and see what the stars are wearing. You're influenced by what they're wearing. And so there are little things you can do to start to claim that leadership and executive presence. I'm going to stop talking here to give everybody else a chance to talk as well.
Maybe we're going to talk. I'll take 1 minute, and I will say that I'm seeing a lot of questions and comments around like HR leading culture. And I will say, I like to flip the script. We don't actually lead the culture. Our leaders are the ones that are working with our employees every day. We enable culture. And yes, I hear you, and I get HR lady, and I get hugs, and I get, and it's partially, it could be a good thing too, right? It's relationship. We're not here to be buddies. But we're also not here to be the doers. We're not go and do this, go and print that, go and fire that, right? Our job ultimately, my view, feel free to chime in, is business enablement. Our job is to help build better leaders, to empower them with the right tools and resources and information to build great teams. And so when you think about it from that lens, I think it makes it a little bit easier to think about how we incorporate the executive presence piece of it as an HR leader. It is about enablement for me, ultimately.
What else? Oh, go ahead, Angela. Yeah.
I just want to jump in. Somebody made a comment right now. Who's responsible if other associates do not see us as HR professionals with position and name? As HR professionals, regardless of what level you are, make sure you're establishing relationships with your client group, whether that's the executives that you support or the managers and the folks in the department. So make sure you're having regular one-on-ones with the managers that you support, just one-on-ones. 15 minutes or 30 minutes every couple of weeks to say, what's going on for you? What's keeping you up at night? What is happening that is impacting people that I can work with you on? And by having these one-on-one relationships, they start seeing you as a name, as opposed to just HR, just the HR girl. So I wanted to address that comment that popped up.
Just add one more comment in here. Oh, sorry, Lucy, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, when I think HR, we work with HR professionals a lot because they're our buyers, and often they're trying to get their ideas across to senior executives, and they're trying to get resources and budget for some of the initiatives that they want to deliver in companies, and having that executive presence and that influence is really important to help get that budget that they want to put those initiatives forward that they want to run out for people. And we talk a lot about like, well, where do you sit at the table? We help them actually quite a lot with when they need to pitch their idea to senior leadership, how they come across, where they're sitting in a room. For those of you who work in person, when you're walking into a room, are you putting yourself like in the corner because you're feeling like you're there to be like HR, or are you taking a literal seat at the table, in the middle of the table or at the head of the table? Is your chair high enough so that you're not sitting half on the floor when everyone else is taller than you if you're not super tall? Are you making sure that you're getting airtime in the conversation within the first 10 minutes, that your voice is heard? For those of you on Zoom, when you're pitching these ideas, are you making sure that if you look at all of us panelists, we're taking up about a third of the space here? So if you flipped us, we'd take up the whole space, about an inch across the top of your head. So your eye level is right at the camera, so that we're not looking up your nose and we're not looking down on you from above as well. All these kind of small positioning things help greatly, whether you're HR or not, but particularly when you're trying to put your ideas across in a way where you're trying to get budget or get sign off from senior executives. These little things just really help. So I just wanted to pop that out there as well.
Thank you so much. Tammy, I'm so sorry. I just saw you come off mute. Did you want to add something? Please.
No, just ditto. I was just going to say, I feel like HR, as a function can get a bad rap, right? It can be, discredited. But I love, and I think LaDonna put it in there, build credibility of the function by being a business leader, not HR. And that's exactly what Lucy was saying and exactly what I was going to say, like have your voice, right? Be yourself, be authentic, elevate your role, but have a voice, and the rest will follow.
I will add the following great insights for all of the panelists here, learning lots. I will add the more that we as HR business leaders can understand the business and can understand the collective and what they are working on, the ability to articulate the business language will definitely help with that executive presence, because now they start seeing not only curiosity in you about the business, but also understanding of the business and the financials. And that's something that is important for executive presence, to start those conversations, start building trust.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that really speaks to like being part of the business. You are a business leader, not the HR lady or HR man or HR dude or everybody be quiet, HR is here. Such amazing and powerful and inspirational words from all of you. And we're getting that in the comments as well, that folks are wishing that this could be longer. Final words of wisdom. We have about 3 minutes left. And I would love to hear just briefly from each of you, final words of wisdom for the HR professionals in our audience today.
I'll go back to how I started. Know who you are, know your brand. Know how you want to grow as a leader and how you want to be seen. What people always say, know what you want people to say about you when you're not in the room. How would they describe you, and own that. And I think, you just one step at a time, to Lucy's point, right? Just own it. It will eventually become natural. It'll eventually become your brand.
I will go. Be authentic. Know that you are a business leader, and also focus on the collective.
I will pinch a quote from Taylor Marley, the amazing poet, and he says, speak with conviction. To say what you believe in a manner that bespeaks the determination with which you believe it. And that's how I'd like to finish. And I think that's really important, just to make sure that we are having that conviction. And even if we don't really feel that conviction, that we speak in a manner that does bespeak the determination with which we believe it. Because as HR folks, what you say matters. You are cultural ambassadors for the company, and you know so much. You have such a pulse on all areas of the business. And so what you have to say does count, and it does matter. And speak with that conviction.
My notes, Lucy, literally say communicate with courage and conviction. That's literally my closing point. So ditto. And I think don't be afraid. No, I love it. I actually have to go look up that quote. Don't be afraid to flip the script. We are leaders, regardless of whether we're business, HR, operations. We are leaders in our space. And so don't be afraid to drive the decisioning instead of waiting for someone to tell you what the business strategy is. You should know the business strategy, know the business language, and not be afraid to come out and say, this is what we need to get us from where we are today to where you want us to be. So flip the script are my last 3 words.
So many great points. And I will add, when you are talking or in a meeting, make sure you're presenting yourself with confidence. That doesn't mean arrogant, and it doesn't mean that you know everything. It can be confident to say, you know what? I don't know, but let me look into that and get back to you. So it doesn't mean knowing everything. It means having the confidence to know that you know what you're talking about, or you can figure it out, and you've got the presence to do that.
Thank you so much to this panel. You all are fascinating and smart and creative and such good communicators. It's been such a pleasure to be in the room with you and with our viewers who brought in such rich comments. Please, everybody, feel free to connect or follow with all of us on LinkedIn so that you can keep engaging in rich conversations, and we'll see you in the next panel. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.